Fearless. It's not a word most people use after 60, but maybe it's the one that matters most. Because fear doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it hides in quiet corners, in the overstuffed drawers, the yellowing papers, the souvenirs that sit untouched but never forgotten. We tell ourselves they hold our memories, but often, they hold us hostage to a version of ourselves that no longer exists. Every photo, every trinket, every receipt seems to whisper, "You mattered here." But what if those whispers are drowning out the voice asking, "What's next?" What if the things we're protecting are the very things keeping us from living freely today? That realization found Harold Winslow, 72, retired naval engineer, one calm Tuesday morning. He reached into his kitchen cabinet for a mug and pulled out nine mugs from cruises that no longer sailed, destinations that had changed, and people who'd long drifted from his life. He stood there, staring at them, and smiled sadly. "Why," he said aloud, "am I starting every day with things that belonged to yesterday?" It wasn't about mugs, it was about meaning. Hal realized he'd been curating a museum of moments instead of creating new ones. So that morning, he made a promise, to keep one mug that felt like joy and release the rest with gratitude. That single act didn't just clear a shelf, it cleared space in his spirit. Because decluttering, Hal learned, isn't about losing things, it's about choosing courage over comfort, peace over proof, and finally making room for what's still ahead. Step 1. Start with what you touch every day. Hal didn't begin in closets, basements, or those mysterious boxes labeled later. He started with something far smaller, but far more powerful, the drawer he opened every single morning. The one that stuck halfway when he tried to pull it, the one crammed with spare keys that opened nothing, half-dead batteries, a tangle of rubber bands, and coupons from grocery stores that had already closed. He said, "If I can't find peace in the first thing I touch each day, how will I find it anywhere else?" That moment changed everything. Because clutter isn't always dramatic, it's often ordinary. It hides in plain sight, in the routines we've stopped questioning. The drawer, the coffee counter, the mail pile by the phone, these aren't storage spaces. They're small daily irritations that quietly drain energy and joy. So Hal emptied that drawer, one handful at a time. No grand music, no fancy baskets, just honesty. He found an instruction booklet for a radio he no longer owned, a screwdriver that didn't fit any screw in the house, and a dried-out pen that hadn't written a word in a decade. For every item, he asked himself one simple question: do I use this, or do I just move it around? By the time the drawer slid shut again, smooth, effortless, silent, something else had shifted. That small drawer became a symbol. For the first time in years, Hal didn't start his morning with frustration. He started with clarity. And the ripple effect was immediate. His breakfast tasted warmer, his kitchen felt calmer, and his thoughts moved slower, lighter. Clutter doesn't just fill our homes, it fills our habits. We grow used to irritation, to reaching past what we don't need just to get to what we do. And every time we do, we remind ourselves, unconsciously, that disorder is normal. But it doesn't have to be. When Hal realized this, he began seeing daily clutter everywhere. The wallet overflowing with old receipts. The keychain that clanked with keys to doors that no longer existed. The medicine cabinet stocked with bottles older than his grandkids. He didn't declutter his home, he decluttered his touchpoints. Because freedom begins not with the attic or the garage, but with the places your fingers go automatically. That's where your time, patience, and peace leak away the fastest, and where they can be reclaimed the quickest. So if you're wondering where to start, don't look for the biggest mess. Look for the thing that greets you at sunrise, the counter where you make coffee, the remote you fumble for, the drawer you keep meaning to get to later. That's the heartbeat of your clutter. Choose one of those today. Empty it. Wipe it down. Decide, intentionally, what earns its place back. Feel the ease of one simple drawer sliding open without resistance, the quiet relief of not digging through the past just to live in the present. It's not about minimalism. It's about momentum, the tiny shift that tells your brain, I'm capable of change. Because fearless decluttering doesn't start with storage bins or donation boxes. It starts with a moment of truth, and the courage to touch what you already touch, but finally see it differently. Ask yourself, What do I reach for every day that could feel easier tomorrow? Start there. That's not just the first drawer you'll clear, it's the first weight you'll lift off your spirit. Step 2. The feeling over object principle. Everyone tells you to ask, does it spark joy? But after 60, joy isn't always the right question. Because life changes, and so do the meanings attached to what we own. What once brought joy may now bring nostalgia, and what once made us smile might now make us ache. So instead of asking about joy, ask this: does it bring me peace? When Hal came across his late wife's old cardigan, that question hit him like a wave. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, a soft trace of time that felt both beautiful and unbearable. 4 years, he'd kept it sealed in a plastic bag at the back of a drawer, convincing himself that was honoring her memory. But every time he caught sight of that bag, he felt a quiet sadness, a tug between love and loss. One evening, while folding laundry, he realized something simple but profound: his memories didn't need preserving, they needed living. So he took the cardigan out of the drawer and laid it across his lap. The color had faded, and the sleeves were frayed, but it still carried warmth. Instead of storing it away again, he brought it to a local seamstress and asked her to turn it into a pillow cover for his reading chair, the same chair where his wife once sat, talking about their next trip, their next project, their next chapter. Now, that pillow doesn't haunt him. It holds him. It doesn't symbolize what's gone. It represents what remains: love, comfort, continuity. Every time he leans against it, it reminds him not of absence, but of peace. This is what the feeling over object principle truly means. It's not about keeping or throwing things away, it's about transforming their role in your life. You don't need to hide every sentimental item in a box labeled memories. You can bring them into your present, where they can still serve you emotionally and practically. Maybe it's your mother's handwritten recipes. Instead of letting them yellow in a folder, scan and print them as kitchen art, daily reminders of warmth and tradition. Maybe it's your father's old watch that no longer ticks. Turn it into a keychain, a small touchstone you carry into new days. Maybe it's your child's baby blanket. Stitch a piece into a tote bag or a quilt. When we reimagine the objects tied to our past, we do something powerful. We release the burden of preservation and replace it with participation. We stop curating a museum of our lives and start creating a living home that reflects who we are now. Hal says, "I thought I had to protect my memories. I didn't realize they were strong enough to live outside the drawer." That realization changed how he looked at everything, from old photos to souvenirs to the keepsakes tucked into boxes marked someday. Because peace doesn't come from what you keep or give away. It comes from how you reshape what remains. Transformation, not storage, is the real act of remembrance. So before you tuck something sentimental away again, pause and ask yourself, what if this story could take on a new form? Could it be seen, touched, or used in a way that brings calm instead of ache? When you choose peace over possession, you don't lose the story, you give it new life. That's what fearless decluttering looks like, not erasing your past, but inviting it to live gracefully in your present. Step 3. The next room liberation rule. Most people, when they start decluttering, ask the same question: where should I begin? But Hal learned to ask a better one: where do I miss myself the most? Because sometimes clutter isn't just physical. It's the quiet barrier standing between you and the version of yourself that's waiting to come back. For Hal, that place was his study, a small room at the back of the house that once smelled of pencil shavings and coffee. It used to be his sanctuary, where he'd sit for hours sketching ship designs and journaling about the places he'd visited. But after retirement and loss, life shifted. The study slowly turned into a storage room, stacks of magazines, unopened mail, and boxes of things he couldn't yet face. Every time he walked past it, he told himself, "I'll get to it soon." But deep down, he avoided it because it reminded him of everything he'd stopped doing. One rainy afternoon, he decided to face it. Not because it was messy, but because he missed that room and the man who used to live in it. He stood at the doorway for a long time, breathing in the stale air of dust and delay. Then, one box at a time, he began. He sorted through old notebooks filled with sketches, letters from old shipmates, and tax papers from decades past. For every item, he asked, is this helping me move forward or keeping me anchored? When he finished, he placed a single lamp on the desk, opened the window, and sharpened one pencil. The air felt lighter. The silence, peaceful. Later that evening, when his daughter called, she asked what he was doing. He said, I didn't find space, I found myself. That's the heart of the next room liberation rule. Don't declutter to clean, declutter to reconnect. Choose one room, not because it's convenient, but because it holds a piece of your identity that got buried under the weight of everyday living. Maybe it's your sewing room that turned into a laundry dump. Maybe it's your workshop that became a parking spot for old boxes. Maybe it's your garden shed, your piano corner, or that chair by the window you haven't sat in since you moved a pile of things onto it for now. Liberation doesn't always mean getting rid of everything. It means creating room for who you are to breathe again. It's not about having an empty space, it's about having an inviting one. When you walk into a room that's been reclaimed, you feel it in your chest, that slow exhale, that sense of belonging, that moment of remembering, I still matter here. It's emotional oxygen. So don't start where it's easiest. Start where it's meaningful. Go to the place that used to light you up and ask yourself, what needs to leave so I can return? For Hal, it was his study. For you, it might be the kitchen table where you once painted, the back porch where you watched sunsets, or the piano bench that's been silent for years. Wherever it is, that's where your story is waiting. Because the real purpose of decluttering isn't to tidy up your home, it's to rediscover the parts of your life that got lost beneath the piles. When you free a room, you don't just clear a space, you reclaim a version of yourself that deserves to live again. Step 4. The 4 boxes of truth. Most people decluttering are told to grab 4 boxes and label them: keep, donate, trash, maybe. But Hal realized that those words carried the wrong tone. They sounded transactional, almost cold, like he was managing inventory, not memories. And he didn't want to feel like a warehouse clerk in his own life. He wanted closure, not judgment. So one morning, as he began sorting through the things in his living room, books stacked too deep, drawers full of tools, and dozens of old photos, he took a marker and wrote new labels. The first box, he called Keep with Purpose. These were things that served him today, not just once upon a time. His reading glasses, his favorite books, the tools he still used, the mug he drank from every morning. All items that made his daily life easier, calmer, or more meaningful. He said, if it earns its keep, it stays. The second box was Keep with Love. This one wasn't about usefulness. It was about connection. A seashell his daughter found when she was 8. His wedding photo. The handwritten note his wife left him years ago, taped to a recipe card that said, "Don't forget to laugh." He said, love doesn't need to be practical to have a place, but it does need to be intentional. The third box, Share the Story, was his favorite. These were items that had served their time with him but still had meaning, just maybe not for him anymore. His old Navy jacket went to his grandson. The camera he used during his travels went to a friend who just retired. He said, these things aren't leaving me, they're continuing through someone else. Passing them on didn't feel like loss, it felt like generosity. And the fourth box, Thank and Release. That was where the transformation happened. Instead of labeling it trash or donate, Hal reframed the act entirely. He said, every object deserves a good ending. Each item had played a role, a dish that served hundreds of meals, a tool that built half the house, a gift that once brought a smile. Before letting them go, he'd pause for a moment, say a quiet thank you, and then release them, not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. When Hal looked around at the 4 boxes, he realized he'd turned a chore into a ceremony. The labels changed everything. Instead of deciding what to get rid of, he was deciding what to honor, repurpose, or set free. Decluttering stopped feeling like failure. It became reflection. This method isn't about categories, it's about conversation. You start talking to your belongings in a new way. You stop asking, what should I keep? And start asking, what story does this still tell in my life? If it still speaks to your present, it belongs. If it only echoes your past, it's ready for a new chapter. The 4 boxes of truth remind us that every object once had a purpose, even if that purpose has now been fulfilled. Letting go isn't the same as discarding. It's completing the story. So, grab 4 boxes today and rename them your own way. Call them stay, heart, share, and farewell, or use, cherish, gift, and gratitude. Whatever words speak peace into your process, use those. Because decluttering isn't about what you lose, it's about what you choose to keep with love, what you choose to release with grace, and how you learn to say goodbye with kindness. Step 5. Tackle the silent storage zones. Every home has a place where time seems to stop. For some, it's the garage. For others, the attic, basement, or shed. We call them storage spaces, but really, they are silent holding zones, where old decisions, forgotten dreams, and emotional delays quietly pile up. You tell yourself you'll get to them later, but later becomes a decade. That's exactly what happened to Hal. He hadn't stepped into his basement in months. Every time he thought about it, his chest tightened a little, not because of the mess, but because of the meaning. Those boxes weren't just cardboard, they were memory containers. He knew what was inside, even without opening them: his wife's gardening supplies, travel guides for countries they'd never visited, dusty power tools, and old maps from a world that had moved on. One Saturday morning, he finally decided to face it. The air was cool, the light dim, the kind that makes everything look older than it really is. The first box he opened was labeled later. He smiled because he remembered writing that word. It had felt hopeful back then. I'll use this later. I'll finish this later. I'll go there later. But as he opened it, the hope turned to quiet understanding. Inside were maps of Europe from a trip he and his wife had planned before her illness. He smoothed them out gently, tracing the route they dreamed of taking. The ink had faded, but the memory hadn't. He kept one map, the one with her handwriting in the corner, and let the rest go. He said, "The memories fit in my mind, not a box." And as he said it, he realized something deeper. Every item we save for later becomes a small weight we carry without realizing it. Each one whispers not yet, and enough of those whispers start to sound like never. When he finished that first box, he didn't feel empty. He felt lighter. The basement wasn't a graveyard anymore, it was just a room again. A place for living, not storing. That's the truth about silent storage zones. They don't just hold things, they hold emotions we've postponed. They hold our one days and maybe some days. Facing them isn't about tidying, it's about reclaiming your future from the things that quietly told you it was too late. Maybe for you it's a garage shelf full of old tools you no longer use but can't throw away because they remind you of when you were stronger, faster, needed. Maybe it's an attic filled with your children's toys, too sentimental to donate but too dusty to display. Or maybe it's the storage unit you've been paying for since the move years ago, the one you can't quite bring yourself to open. Here's the truth Hal learned: when we let objects sleep too long, they stop holding memories and start holding energy. Stale, heavy energy. And as long as they stay untouched, part of us stays frozen with them. So, take one step into that space this week. Don't set out to finish it, just start a conversation with it. Pick one box. Open it. Ask yourself, what did this mean to me then, and what does it mean now? If it still holds purpose, bring it forward. If it only holds the past, thank it and release it. You don't need to clear it all in one day. Even one reopened box is progress. Because every time you choose to face the silent storage zones, you aren't just reclaiming space, you're pressing play on parts of your life that have been paused for far too long. So go ahead. Open that door, even if it creaks a little. The past doesn't need to be boxed up anymore. It's already done its job. Now, it's your turn to live freely again. Step 6. Give forward, not away. Hal always believed in keeping things useful, even if they no longer served him. But one day, while loading donation boxes into his car, he paused. The trunk was full of his old drafting tools, rulers, compasses, and worn leather cases from his engineering days. He'd planned to drop them off at a generic donation center, but something about that didn't sit right. These tools had built bridges, shaped designs, solved problems. They'd been his life's instruments, not just his belongings. He thought, they deserve more than a shelf in a thrift shop. So, instead of giving them away, he gave them forward. He called the local community college where veterans were training in technical design. When he arrived with his toolbox, the instructor's eyes lit up. "We can use these in the classroom," she said. "They'll get handled every day." Hal smiled. "Perfect," he said. "That's what they were built for." That's the heart of Give Forward, Not Away. It's about choosing connection over convenience, turning generosity into legacy. Because true giving isn't about clearing your house, it's about expanding your story. Most people drop things off anonymously, never knowing where they end up. But when you give forward, you choose the destination, a person, a program, a cause that breathes new life into what once served you. That's not loss. That's continuation. Hal said, "It felt like passing the torch, not the toolbox." And that single decision changed how he viewed every item in his home. Suddenly, decluttering wasn't about detachment, it was about direction. He began seeing potential everywhere. The unused camera? He gave it to a young neighbor who dreamed of becoming a photographer. His wife's collection of gardening books? Donated to the senior center that had just started a community greenhouse. Even his old Marine jacket found a second life at the local history museum, displayed as part of a veterans exhibit. Every act of giving forward carried meaning. It connected generations. It kept stories moving. And in return, it replaced the emptiness of getting rid of things with the warmth of purpose fulfilled. That's what intentional giving does. It transforms release into ripple. Your once loved items become stepping stones for someone else's future. A sewing machine can teach a teenager a trade. A set of tools can help a veteran rebuild his career. A stack of books can inspire someone you'll never meet. So before you donate, pause. Look at what you're releasing and ask, who could this actively help? It might take a little more time, a little more thought, but that small effort turns decluttering into community building. And here's something beautiful: when you give forward, gratitude circles back. Hal received letters and photos from people who'd benefited from his donations. One veteran wrote, "Your compass helped me draw my first blueprint. Thank you for believing tools never age, they just find new hands." That's what giving forward really means. You stop treating your possessions as leftovers and start treating them as legacies. You recognize that your life's tools, books, art, and keepsakes have one more job to do, to serve beyond you. So, as you declutter, don't ask only what you can part with. Ask, who could this empower? Because when you give forward, you don't just let go, you lift up. And your story keeps working long after you've set it free. Step 7. Create a light ritual. Most people treat decluttering like a one-time event, something you do once a year, then forget about until the piles creep back in. But Hal learned that true simplicity isn't a single act, it's a rhythm. It's not a purge, it's a practice. And that's how his light ritual was born. Every Sunday morning, before the world stirs, Hal makes himself a cup of coffee, puts on a soft jazz record, and sits quietly in his living room. The rule is simple: he chooses one small thing to let go of. Just one. Sometimes it's an old book he no longer reads, a gadget he never uses, or a photo duplicate from the dozens he's already saved digitally. He doesn't rush. He doesn't overthink. He just breathes, thanks it, and places it gently into his donation box. He calls it his light ritual, not because it's easy, but because it keeps his spirit light. "I don't lose things," he says. "I gain clarity." Over time, the ritual became less about objects and more about mindset. It wasn't about cleaning the house anymore, it was about resetting the heart. By releasing one small thing each week, he gave himself permission to stay unattached, to focus on presence rather than possession. It became his weekly meditation, a conversation with time itself. That's the quiet genius of creating a ritual instead of waiting for motivation. Rituals anchor us. They remove the decision fatigue, the guilt, the endless cycle of "someday I'll get around to it." They give structure to change, and comfort to courage. Hal's ritual works because it's small, humble, even. One item a week doesn't feel intimidating. But after a year, that's 52 moments of letting go. 52 chances to choose peace over clutter, simplicity over sentiment, freedom over fear. It's not about volume, it's about consistency. And here's what makes it powerful for seniors. It respects energy, honors memories, and builds momentum. You don't need to overhaul your home. You just need to keep moving gently toward lightness. Because when something becomes part of your rhythm, like morning coffee or evening walks, it stops feeling like work and starts feeling like wellness. Your own light ritual can take any form that fits your life. Maybe it's 5 photos every Sunday that you delete from your phone or computer. Maybe it's 1 drawer every month that you clear while listening to your favorite record. Maybe it's a morning routine where you place 1 small item in a box labeled for someone else. The key is regularity and intention. Hal says that sometimes he doesn't even donate what he removes right away, he simply places it in a basket by the door. The act of choosing is enough. That small gesture says, I'm still in control of my space, my story, my peace. Decluttering, when turned into ritual, becomes self-care. It reminds you that you don't have to let life pile up, not in your closets, not in your thoughts. You can stay light, week by week, act by act. So don't wait for the perfect moment or the next big cleaning day. Create your own light ritual, a simple practice of release and renewal. Something that keeps you grounded, centered, and free. Because a peaceful home isn't built in one day. It's built one calm, consistent choice at a time. Hal began with a mug, then a drawer, then a shelf. Now, every Sunday, he smiles, sips his coffee, and says softly, today, I'm keeping space for peace. And that, more than anything, is the true art of living lightly. Hal didn't declutter to have less. He did it to live with intention. Every decision he made, from keeping 1 map to donating his tools, from transforming his wife's cardigan into a pillow to creating his Sunday light ritual, was never about letting go for the sake of emptiness. It was about choosing freedom over weight, clarity over chaos, peace over proof. Because aging fearlessly isn't about resisting time. It's about releasing what time has already taught you to outgrow. We spend decades building homes, habits, collections, responsibilities, until we forget that not everything we've built was meant to be permanent. There's strength in construction, yes, but there's wisdom in release. Hal said something once that stays with you long after you hear it. When I stopped managing my stuff, I started managing my joy. That was the quiet shift that changed everything. His home didn't become smaller, it became softer. His days didn't feel emptier, they felt open. That's the heart of the fearless life, knowing that decluttering isn't an act of loss, but of alignment. It's the understanding that you are no longer the person who needed everything you once held onto. You've evolved. You've earned the right to curate your life, not by how much you own, but by how deeply what remains serves your peace. And this message isn't just about Hal. It's about you. The boxes in your attic, the drawers you avoid, the projects you've postponed, they're not your burdens, they're your invitations. Each one is a quiet opportunity to decide, do I want to keep carrying this? Because the truth is, there's no right time to begin. The right time is when you realize that holding on costs more than letting go. Fearless aging is not about fighting wrinkles or chasing youth. It's about uncluttering your path so you can walk into the next chapter with both hands free. It's understanding that simplicity isn't a step backward, it's a return to essence. When you release what no longer fits, you make space for experiences that do. A call with your grandchild, a walk in the morning sun, a peaceful evening without the background noise of things demanding your attention. Hal's story reminds us that decluttering isn't a task, it's a mindset, a quiet, ongoing act of courage. And courage looks different after 60. It's no longer about bold leaps or grand gestures, it's about grace, the grace to stop accumulating and start appreciating. So, if you've felt that nudge, that small voice saying it's time to simplify, to breathe, to start fresh, this is your moment. You don't have to clear it all at once. Just begin with 1 corner, 1 shelf, 1 item, 1 breath. And every time you do, you'll feel that same quiet victory Hal felt, the peace that comes when your home finally matches your heart. If this message spoke to you, don't just move on, act. Hit like, tap the hype button, and subscribe. You get 3 hypes a week, and each one helps lift this community of wise, courageous seniors who are choosing to live with lightness and purpose. Because together, we're not just decluttering our homes, we're decluttering the idea that aging means slowing down. We're proving that it means refining. Let's keep aging wisely and living lightly. And remember, you don't lose yourself by letting go. You find yourself waiting right beneath the weight you've finally released.